Azudi, an adjunct professor of international affairs at Georgetown University. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. I just want to pick up on one thing that Yusuf mentioned when he was bringing us up to speed on the latest developments out of Iran. See, Israel has been fighting Hamas over the past 2 years in Gaza. Hamas, in comparison to Israel, is certainly not as strong. But even up until today, Israel has not been able to defeat Hamas. Now you have the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying on record, we will do this operation, so-called operation against Iran, for as long as it takes. So, I mean, what are we looking at? A decade of fighting between the two countries? Sina, I just want to make sure you can you hear the audio of the transmission?
I can hear your voice, but I can't hear anything in the background.
Okay, I'll repeat my question. Of course, over the past 48 hours, the situation has escalated rapidly, and we have also seen statements coming from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who basically says that his country will conduct this so-called operation against Iran for as long as it takes. But if you look at the way Israel has been engaging with its enemies over the past 2 years, you have Hamas in Gaza, for example. Israel has been trying to fight Hamas for the past 2 years now, but has it earned anything yet? Has Israel been able to defeat Hamas yet? The answer to that is a resounding no. So if you compare Hamas with Israel, for example, Hamas with Iran, for example, Iran is a much more powerful state. It has a bigger army. So I just want to get your thoughts on this. What's going on in Netanyahu's mind when he says that his country is going to conduct this operation, so-called operation against Iran for as long as it takes, when Israel hasn't even been able to defeat Hamas in Gaza?
Well, Hamas and Palestinians are fighting for another purpose, and that is to have their own state. And historically, states cannot defeat non-state actors by the sheer use of military force. Historically, a political solution is the only resolution to such wars. But in the case of Iranians, look, the Prime Minister of Israel, by launching this strike, had 3 objectives. First, to weaken Iran and to do what they did in Lebanon, in Syria, to basically eliminate what they perceive as the Iranian threat. Second, was, I believe, to undermine and torpedo the nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States, which was set for tomorrow, Sunday. And they were quite successful in that. Iranians, and not surprisingly, they've canceled the nuclear talks for tomorrow. We don't know where these talks are headed, but the Prime Minister of Israel has historically tried to undermine these negotiations. He has done it he did it in 2021. He did it in 2015 when the JCPOA was signed. He tried to undermine the implementation. And thirdly, I think it's really for the domestic purposes and his own political ambitions, and that is to stay in power. We have to keep in mind, just a few days ago, there were discussions in Israel to dissolve the parliament, which would have led to the collapse of his cabinet. But now nobody's discussing this, and I'm sure in Israel,
Professor, this is the biggest question that I have on my mind. How on earth Netanyahu is able to get away with all of this, and why?
Well, we have to give him the credit. He's a shrewd politician. He is someone who has been defeated in elections many times. He has always had a comeback, and he has historically he has driven on this wave of I can provide security for the people of Israel. We have to keep in mind, again, when the Oslo process failed, the Israelis elected him because of the attacks in Israel. He has offered this, and now after the October 7 attacks in Israel, he was the prime minister that these attacks happened under his watch. Now he doesn't want to go leave office having been the prime minister that this happened under his watch. He doesn't. He wants to have a different legacy than that.
Given what's been going on right now, what do you think the future holds for the region?
Well, it is very complicated, and we don't know what will happen. It could easily escalate to a total war between a very large country like Iran with a 90 million population and a country that has far superior military equipment. It is the only nuclear armed state in the region. It could easily escalate. What the Israelis have been doing, they started with a decapitation operation of taking out the top brass of the Iranian military, nuclear facilities. Then they went after Iran's air bases. Now they're attacking oil depots, oil refineries, and the energy infrastructure of the country. And Iranians have been attacking Israeli cities. There have been many casualties, civilian casualties in Iran. And again, unless there is an exit ramp, it could easily escalate. And I think the only solution is for the United States and Trump administration to put pressure on the Israelis to restrain themselves, and also to send message to Iranians through Iran's friends in the region, such as Turks, Qataris, Omanis, even the Saudis, and ask Iranians to stand down. Otherwise, the likelihood of a total war in the region is not that far from imagination.
But Professor C, this is what I fail to understand. I mean, I'm of the opinion that there is no way on earth this so-called operation was started overnight. It took months of planning, perhaps over 6 months of planning, because if you look at the precision, the way certain locations were attacked within Iran, you have to say it involved some strategic planning, right? But
yes.
So let's assume for a second that all of this was being planned over the past 4 to 6 months. But at the same time, the U.S. was encouraging, or some would say forcing Iran to come to the negotiating table and engage in nuclear talks, which Iranians would say they were doing. So how do you think these two things can take place at the same time?
Well, I agree that, given the precision of these attacks, Israelis had been planning this. And I think what happened was initially in the first stage of the attacks was the same thing that Ukrainians did to Russia most recently by sending drones inside the country and launching them from inside Russia. And now the Israelis have done it from inside Iran, but I think operation is quite similar in my opinion. And Iranians were not expecting it. Iranians had miscalculated that while negotiations with the U.S. are ongoing, Israelis will not attack. And that was a miscalculation on behalf of the Iranians. That's one thing. But I also think that my guess, and I could be wrong, is that the United States was aware of Israel's planning. The U.S. has good intelligence gathering, but they simply decided not to stop the Israelis from their attacks. And given some of the comments that is coming from the administration, and especially President Trump himself, that he said, I gave Iranians 60 days, and today's day 61, that's yesterday. I think we can safely conclude that the United States was aware of it. I don't think that the U.S. participated in the attacks in any way, but I think it was well aware of it, and perhaps, I have no evidence, it gave the green light to Israelis to go after the Iranians so that the United States can use it as a leverage against Iranians to pressure them to capitulate to its demands.
Right, Professor, looking at what has happened today, and especially if I compare it to last night, of course, last night was more intense. There were massive attacks in Tel Aviv that took the world by surprise. But now, today, Iranian attacks on Israel, they're not of the same intensity. For example, the situation across Tel Aviv appears to be calm. Yes, there have been attacks in the northern part of Israel claiming the life of one person. That's according to Israeli media. So what I'm thinking in my mind right now is, could this possibly indicate all of this is coming to an end and both parties can call it even now? Because over the past 30 minutes especially, we have not seen any significant development in terms of escalation.
Well, what I'm hearing from Tehran is that it is under severe attack. One of the most severe, perhaps the second ever since the end of the Iran-Iraq war, that Tehran has been directly hit so hard. I think that the Israelis are at least attempting to use brute force to force Iranians to stand down. I don't think this will happen, but I hope that this conflict ends very soon. Then later, there have been casualties in Iran, there have been casualties in Israel, and I don't think anyone could justify the killing of civilians by either side.
Of course, and in the end, it's the civilians who pay the heaviest price. Professor
Absolutely.
Sina, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time.
Good to be with you.